Sheila here with Aries tell us, and continuing, she went away. Um, cat face. לא, אבל היא הלכה לשם. בואי מאמה. And continuing on our Aristotelian series, a little bit about, I was talking about the raising of the bar with the requirement for sovereignty, which is both the result of a stellium in Aries, including Neptune in Aries, which always talks about the holistic unit of something. For example, Neptune in Pisces, there was a booming of holistic medicine. Neptune in Aries is holistically looking at anything Mars, from sexuality to arm industry to war to real estate to business. And and when it comes to politics and diplomacy, if in the past the type of, and I call it scorpionic policy. Now, having grown up with a Scorpio, the Scorpio politic is about de-escalating. Scorpio politic is about de-escalating, and it's about basically seeing nature as a given and trying to get the best for the peace out of nature. It's kind of like trying to meet the needs with the business needs and so on and so forth. And whatever we don't like in Scorpio, we usually say, well, that's the nature of the person. I'm just going to have to work with what is. Aries, well, Aries is definitely about being who we are. It's also about the new strategy, the new entrepreneurship, the new perspective of weapon industry, the new perspective on war. And Mars Invisible really accentuates that. And so, if in Scorpio we understand to the deep something, in Aries we require the change. For example, before the Me Too, a lot of people, we had Aries and Uranus conjoining in Aries, squaring Pluto. So before the Me Too, we were basically seeing that the understanding of people that, hey, it's not just that workplace or that person in the workplace or this type of study or this type of, I don't know, landlord. Is done? כן. It is. בטח נתראה עוד 5 דקות. A 5 minuti. In Italy, it is a kind direction, it's a road direction. And if before the Me Too, let's say, people began to understand that, wait a second, this type of behavior we meet in way too many places. That can't work. So if the scorpionic approach would be, oh, these are this type of people, these are, I don't know, the old people of the security, or, yeah, that kind of person, kind of like, okay, amazing. The Americans were raising the patent of dropping somebody, bombing everything, and then dropping another somebody, bombing everything. Um, so, um, still, I would be afraid to be a navigator in the Air Force. So, they seem to sacrifice navigators. I don't know why. Um, and basically, what happened is that around the Me Too, people couldn't just say, okay, that's the nature of the person. I'm going to adapt my approach to their nature. When I look at scorpionic diplomacy, they're trying to meet their needs while adapting to the other person. And um, and they expect somebody to adapt to them. Now, it's not the Libra type of people pleasing. It's a different type of understanding of human nature that says, okay, this is their nature. Now I'm going to adapt my strategy to what is their nature, and try to get what I need from their nature till they run into a Taurus. And then they have to completely transform. um, so, but with Aries, we set the bar. Okay, which basically means that our Aries placements, and Aries is always the I am, even if it's a chart. Let's say Aries is, I don't know, your seventh house. I don't, yeah. לא כזה פנייה, אבל אף קורס הוא כרגע לא פנייה. Yeah, mama. Let's say even Aries is the seventh house. Aries is the I am. And this is it's a good tropical tip for the Aries, because wherever Aries is in your chart, that is your sense of self. So let's say it's your second house like mine, your values are part of your I am. Ninth house, your teachings are part of your I am. Now, around the Me Too, it was simply a live or die issue, where no longer could people work with rapists around, and that would mean our income, that would mean our housing. And so people went kamikaze on it. Most of people thought that they are going to die. I thought that I was going to die. But it was no longer possible to live in this way. This is Aries. Scorpio definitely transforms. Aries sets the bar. And with Aries, each and every individual sovereignty has to be honored. Attempting, and all the gaslights that were, oh, sex work is work, I choose what to do with my body, I this, I that. Amazing. As long as I am in risk of trafficking, whatever I do for a living, even being a teaching assistant in academia, you're gonna have to see how each and every one of us is not raped, and so on and so forth. And that also means basically not people pleasing, which creates inflammation and various mental and physical health conditions. Can. So it's kind of like, hey, if a person like, your body, your right, your everything. But that cannot override my body, my rights, my sovereignty, my I am. And it cannot be depriving me out of the ability to make a living, housing, and so on and so forth. And then the Me Too went kaboom. Now, ain't no, but like, oh, the entire World Foundations was based on unregistered births, rape until the person rapes, um, perpetuation of smugness, perpetuation of trauma, um, believing that healing is by raping another, and the temporary relief, which is basically an addiction to being a sex offender. Getting away, getting away, getting away, exposing, starting a war. What if people cannot rape? The fundamentals of the core of society is changing. That was now people thought, ah, the Me Too, it went to two outer astrology, two outer planets meet. For example, let's take COVID, completely different version of a set of events. Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto meet conjuncting in Capricorn, Saturn's home sign. Of course, the world will not be the same afterwards. Uranus, Aries meet in Aries, squaring Pluto. Now, in terms of diplomacy, war strategy, peace talks, negotiations, business, people expect the core issues of that are being unraveled right now to change the way we do all of these. Intelligence was entirely based on ritual, torture, rape, and sex trafficking through mind control. Who is Epstein ring intelligence? First and foremost. Can that yield sovereignty? No. Did that infiltrate the militaries? Hmm. How does that affect negotiations at war? And people expect for politics that is, if you think about new politics or different politics, people expect zero rape, zero slavery, zero energy siphon, zero Epstein rings, okay, or zero the Trolodex, politics, economy, and negotiations and intelligence. I have said that at 2023. And I've said that at 2024, and I've said that at 2025. US Security Council 2035. כן, תודה. It's not the image of. Now, the Scorpio polity, and I have 3 planets in Scorpio. I'm well aware of Scorpio politics. I was the first one during the Me Too that saw that the dean was unhappy because he was persecuted and found guilty, and saw that the people that couldn't speak about their trauma were unhappy. because they were silent and saw that the person that was managing the things. And so I was like, wait a second. The structure needs to be so that the dean gets to speak, the lady that was harassed gets to speak, and so on and so forth. And it's a public issue, so of course, of course they can get to express themselves. And I was being very scorpionic. I was like explaining to the dean, listen, the way the younger students that talk about you is that even the way you gaze at female students is experienced as, and I'm like, this is not their side. It's new generation. And though and their side can't go no more. That's very Scorpio politics. And by the way, I was really hated for that. I wasn't going to litigate, let's say, I don't know, so and so, because I was like, wait, if so and so is, let's say, an adjunct, and I don't know what's their role in secret societies, the person who is going to be the jurisdiction, and forget for a second about it's the same network and so on and so forth, what did he has to do to get? And aren't all of us eligible for litigation of the same compensation for the MK often MK Ultra trafficking ring funded by classified projects? Because if the person that tried to harm me would want to recover, he would meet the same psychologist that would try to keep him back in the cult. And even that psychologist would be eligible for the life like I was saying. So so this is where the Mars as the ruler of Aries and Mars as the ruler of Scorpio unite to take action what actually matters. But it does, and this is what should not be questioned, it denotes of raising the bar. We're not going to ask for less, we're going to ask for even more, because we're going to understand, well, why was the little that we were asking not possible? Because to me it was like, okay, why would men and women fight to begin with? If a person is gay, then you're gay. And if a person is not gay, what's to fight? Like, whatever the, think about groups theory, with the union of the circle of my desires and another's desires, if there is attraction and per time and space, is the action potential. So what do people find? Like, why to begin with? Now, this would require things to unfold. Oh, they are security. What is security? Intelligence. Okay. Why does it feel like each and every person they call narcissist? It was like that all these offenders, like they were manufactured in Ford. That's literally what I said before I knew about cloning. That's ritual abuse. But that's the training method. And now Aries is kind of like, well, academia. The brand was innovation. We can change the heuristics. We can have insight from the psychology departments. There's nobody tending to the transferences between students and teachers. There is it's kind of like all the good solutions, except that would negate epitene ring. Okay, what do these guys want? They're like a sex cult. Okay, but why do they need to rape? I mean, sex is lovely, but why raping? Because they need to be controlling over another. Okay, why? Because they want another person to commit crimes against humanity and then have that person accountable to extortion and then loot the wealth of the country and the people. To what? To more extortion. That means the judges and the this, yeah. This is where I write a satire about that. I basically only this year understood that the satire I was writing was about the Epstein ring. And this is where I see the conglomerate of people trying to insist on me to litigate someone, where it's like it's an entire, it's kind of like, even if he was there, Mark Dutroux or Jeffrey Epstein, it's kind of like that's a network. Why would I send one person to jail? Let's say that was a possibility when it's an entire network. Because at any, now from that point on, what cannot be? This is also why I did not go to have certification in astrology. Because I took a break from academia because of what? Now, anything that requires me to enroll in would have the same problems. Because it's the training of people that would be eligible to do something to do with consultation or to do with public opinion and so on and so forth. Which indeed was true. Okay, when I did certification for, let's say, holistic health practitioner as aromatherapy, which counter to what people think is not massages. Okay, touch therapy is not for everyone, um, but because I wasn't agreeing to basically work with the Epsteins, then, and that happened around COVID, then there were attempts to kidnap me, attempts to confiscate my certifications, um, torturing of my teacher. Now everybody know it, but they can't say it. And then of course they would want whatever what is they would want. It means that they would want my teacher to also be a sex trafficker, and she's a doula. What will she traffic? Oh, they need unregistered births. Now here is the drama. When a person experiences something like that in academia, they would say, okay, litigation is not punitive, it's for preventing future issues. And for that, I need to first go to therapy and heal enough to decipher and discern and act from a wish to change, not vengeance or anything of that sort. Now, what from that point on cannot happen? Me being an employee, me working in a schedule that does not attune to my recovery, which is another way where I began to look at electional astrology. me living in a place where I cannot have the space to be myself as an adult person, independent of ability to work, and without the risk of being raped or without the requirement to basically participate in trafficking, and usually of children. All those things from the aftermath of the Me Too cannot happen. Now we're going through a cycle where there's a bunch of planets in Aries and Neptune and the Saturn with Mars invisible, and this is where we begin to um, realize that we begin to realize what are what are the things that are relevant to now. What is the type of diplomacy that can no longer happen? What is the type of peace negotiations that are no longer suffice? What are our requirements when we talk about defense or even interest? What is national interest? National interest is nothing but the conglomerate of individual interests of each individual in each nation. Now, the Scorpio politics, which was like, okay, big picture, they have A bombs, we have A bombs, they have oil, we have oil. Anyway, we're gonna have to work together. Partially is still there. We don't give that up. But there are certain things that cannot happen anymore. What are those things I believe we're going to see throughout the coming month? Um, Germany. Okay, the GDP is sinking to 4% up to 2030 in Germany, and it was considered the Qatar of Europe. Again, labor, labor crisis is not labor crisis. It's targeted individuals crisis. Is sex work is work crisis. Um, it's Gen Z friendly job position crisis. And this is definitely one of those times where people go over how they see sovereignty, what is needed for sovereignty. So, while I can't say it's a Me Too thing, it's definitely something even bigger than that because it's something that takes into account why are we fighting for oil? when the panel that loads the electric Volvo in Sweden is solar. Not in Israel, not in Morocco, not even in southern Italy or Greece. Why did we not attack the energy infrastructures of Iran to immediately drop the Ayatollah regime? Because they would attack one center in Israel and shut Israel completely down. Wait, but isn't Israel full of solar roofs? In some places, yes, but they're connected to, they're like the Volvo. All my love to Gili. So Gili can fully solar power charge while it drives as many other solar cars, but our country can't. Why Epstein? But Epstein, yeah, Rockefeller, Epstein, banking, intelligence. Um, Now, when people want their human rights, they want their human rights. It expresses itself in various ways. And this is where we have to bridge between the scorpionic politics to the fact that we definitely are raising the bar. There's a lot of realization in the background that many places where people counted on making them sex trafficking cities run into the people that have already said no to top positions. Okay, I given up a position as apprenticeship in the Israeli-Palestinian Chamber of Commerce as an outside of intelligence, shoulder to shoulder with someone who was the head of intelligence, because of the type of talks and the type of conversations that even women participated in, that I could no longer. My life energy, my sexual energy, my well-being, my heart alignment doesn't go with that. Although the vision of making peace and trade was something that I deeply resonate with, but trafficking is not peace and it's not trade. People like, I wonder why that's civilian. Now here is another thing. The voters um, begin, particularly with all this Uranus, Aries, Uranus, Taurus. A lot of them did the shadow work of learning how to communicate, learning embodiment, and they began to see results. They began to see attracting the right clientele, even for business that is nothing to do with, I don't know, sex positive Jada courses or anything like that. Releasing from financial dogmas or from dogmas around relations, which affect how people see politics, economy. And then the echelons that were at the decision-making junctures, where we would expect that they would have the most advanced, were binded by the esotericism of the Nazi era, which Ghislaine Maxwell refined on. Now, definitely Ghislaine Maxwell is Ghislaine Maxwell and not Ghislaine Epstein, but we are expecting a feminism that's better than that, erotically, sensually, non-erotically, business-wise, economically. We're expecting an orgasm that's embodied and where energy is manifesting from what we actually do want. We're expecting that connection to embodied sexuality is not um, interpreted as compliance with trafficking. Even in more traditional type of settings, and had Slavic colleagues where even where the notion of so many families had been grieving daughters and overcoming the culture that treated a birth of a girl as something that is not a continuation of the legacy, or that, by the way, the name Ghislaine Maxwell rather than Ghislaine Epstein was changing. But 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 here is the gap between how um, the Epstein ring would see feminism and the person that did their shadow work around relations, around financial freedom. Now, the thinning of the veil, particularly with Saturn Neptune, is bridging a lot of these things. And that also dissolves certain barriers, even linguistically. If we say yoga to an elite person or an intelligence person, they are expecting what type of trickery, breathing wise and muscle contraction wise, they need to raise their member to participate in an orgy with 12 years olds. Just how do you explain to the member and the member that the member has striked against being a pedo, but the father of the member is trying to with someone he could be the father of? And now, within the secret society is no problem. There's technology, there is neurotoxins, neurotoxins, medicine, whatever. If they can get away with what they got away with, namely raping children since childhood, and they were also being raped, so they felt like it's even reasonable. It's like if they're being raped, so they are raped, so everybody gets away with that. And so, um, of course, what do you do about the physical challenge? A shit ton of drugs, and then they provide jobs. Now, of course, yeah, it's not just the money settlements for the extortion called just public money. Oh yeah, they can set some public money allocation for also civilians to go to pay for um, basically raping someone, but it's marketed as sex work and glorified, and then it's like, well, now the civilians are going to get extorted too, and then they can be a parliament member, a business conglomerate, you know. So while those moves are trying to permeate to more layers of society, basically offering social mobility through participation in the party. And it's also the reaction of the public versus the reactions of the secret societies is always impressive. They call it a war crime when it happens in the Nova, but that's like another day on the job. Really can't say it. And a lot of members are dissociated. Green waters. Everybody calm down. Green waters. um, let's see if this thing is published now. Half published. The fluff is that. Um, I don't know. Okay. Um, Now, meanwhile, with the people that did their shadow work and did their um, challenging beliefs, and then they began to learn also about other tools like astrology, esoterics, um, refining sex magic, not like Ghislaine Maxwell, but to the opposite. Hey, wait a second, my sexual energy is mine, but also the intention around my orgasm is mine. We began to be more aware of more layers of sovereignty that we weren't aware before. And the requirement is for the world to change and accommodate. Now, think about the missiles that are falling on all the risky, risky dangerous toxin, and one of them is like a pharmaceutical lab, pharmaceutical developing. It's like, what is so toxic there? Like petrochemicals, I understand, is was defined as chomes, which basically means chomarim mesukanim, which is dangerous um, material or dangerous chemical, but it was medicine. Gates is being litigated, and it's becoming evident that the vaccine was killing more people than COVID. I have a new YouTube account over Gates for quoting Kenya court decision. And so let's think about COVID. COVID was Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn conjunction. Then we had Saturn squaring Uranus. No longer will people just listen to their doctors. Okay? Kind of like the world has changed. And the people that thought that they're going to have, I don't know, let's say slave colony, run into Gen Zers, the great resignation generation. Also, the divisions of liberal society that is basically gaslighting for sex trafficking, or orthodox society, which is another gaslighting for sex trafficking. Those, both of these are no longer relevant. And the entire lexicon of, let's say, even boomers is incompatible with anything to do with that. And here's the thing: these are usually the people at the junctures of not even not the frontier, but the behind the scenes. Boomers have Uranus square Uranus with the millennials, and Pluto square Pluto with Gen Z. Now, I want boomers to think back to their 40s. That would be their Pluto square Pluto. Some of them even a bit earlier because Pluto was running so fast that some of them, even with their Saturn return, would be around the Pluto square. Pluto is so fast through Scorpio. 1995-6 was already the Pluto square for Pluto Regulus, for the first degrees of Pluto in Virgo. And then this lasts until 2007-8. 2007-8 would be the last Pluto squares of Pluto at the last degrees of Virgo. In the meantime, we would have 9/11, Um, Another sort of Gulf War and war in Afghanistan. The subprime crisis, okay, upon the Ingress. Epstein, Detru. It started with Detru and closed with Epstein. Rolodex. Now, here's the thing about Pluto-Uranus conjunction of the boomers. This was the time where they learned to navigate chaos and to control chaos. The 90s to the 2000s is where we discovered that we can no longer fully control chaos. We have a friction. And now Uranus is ingressing to Gemini, which is the other square. For example, boomers can adapt to Trump, which has Uranus in Gemini natally, but not get Trump to adapt to them, as we saw with Greenland. And this is because the Pluto conjunction of Uranus was attempting to control chaos, and the squares, whether from Pluto or from Uranus, pose a challenge and a friction, which, by the way, can even be risky to people that are wearing the technology based on that, which would be heart chips and brain chips. Now, this is going to happen in every generation. Okay, the millennials, for example, would have Pluto, Uranus square with the Uranus Pisces. And Pluto square with the new generation is born in Pluto Aquarius. So we're now in our 40s, and the people that will basically um, require us to reform our thinking in our 60s are now just the babies. And so, while the world has to adapt to the ability to retire, the ability to have a meaningful life, and bridging those in order to both diplomatically and in time and war strategy reshape the world. And here is the thing, if the young generation is not happy, who is going to take care? You know what I heard on YouTube? Um, a conversation where a child was disowned from inheritance because the child did not bring children, And that child was in their, I don't know, 30s. And to begin with, they did not break children because they couldn't afford it because of the changing economy. They were disowned from the inheritance, and then their parent is like, "Hey, could you help me?" Kind of um, cater to the elderly. And then that child had to refuse that because they needed to stay at work. And then they say, "Well, I can like, can we negotiate me being back in the inheritance?" And the parents say, "Yeah, maybe, I don't know, 10%, 30%." And the child's like, "Well, what I can offer is that you will pay me the full salary of a person that does it because I don't have another viable income, which is why I didn't bring children." Okay. In other cases, is children that remembered rituals that they were dissociated from Anya Week style, which is ritual abuse. And there, the challenge is already traumas that can surface. There's so many cases where a child was molested and then their parent died in hospital, and sometimes they were catering to their parent and happy that the parent was dead and blaming themselves. Tanya Khun. Um, and while the therapists are required to cross the bar, where they have to reckon that their job infrastructure is to keep the bar from being crossed, is to keep the glass ceiling, when the spirit of the time no longer do people trust therapists, which is the entire health profession. Around the Arab Spring, the intergenerational wealth gap, and in Hebrew we saw it in what was called pensiat activit. Pensiat activit, which basically means the pension where the pension would compound and would be very benevolent towards the retirees. And the retirees, the people would work in one job. They could be better performing, not so good performing, as long as they have this one job. So there wasn't a lot of job flexibility, um, but they knew that they have this very important pension that indeed came with a lot of benefits. The children would already not be expected to retire. Parents wrote their assets, which they expected passive income. So let's say parents retire and move to another country. They have an asset, they rent the asset. The asset is going to be inherited by the children, but as long as they're alive, they rent it and have a passive income. The child doesn't have money to pay rent, but oh, the parents wrote the asset on the child simply because they said, well, the child will anyway inherit the asset. Never did they think that the child would not even have money to pay rent. Now, the child comes up with that naively when they begin to demonstrate for affordable rent, not even affordable housing. And then when they're asked, but there is this asset written on your name, it's like, yeah, my parents, that's their pension, but they rent the place. We actually had an activist that had this exact problem. And a lot of people were laughing and mocking, but it